Today we're going to talk about two things, early years of the war and the Battle of Antietam. So let's back up. Last battle we talked about was the First Battle of Bull Run. It's the first major battle of the Civil War. The North leaves from basically Maryland, starts marching south towards Richmond, Virginia, which was the Southern capital. The Southern Army marches up from Richmond, meets them at a place called Manassas. The battle was named the First Battle of Bull Run. The South ends up winning the battle, but more importantly, it shows both sides it's going to be a long and difficult war. That was the most important thing. Following Bull Run, Lincoln's going to go ahead and fire his first general, Irvin McDowell, and he replaces him with a man named George McClellan. So McDowell is out, McClellan is in, and we're going to start to see a pattern of Lincoln being impatient with his generals. So McClellan, his strengths, very good organizer, very good with training up his men. His men loved him. His downfall was he was overly cautious, and you'll see that in a second. So he trains his men up for 7 months, but does not attack. I mentioned just a second ago he's very popular with his men. He's probably pretty popular with his men because he wasn't putting them in a battle, and I don't think many of these guys were desperate to go into war. Anyhow, Lincoln's growing more and more impatient. He says, if General McClellan does not want to use the army, I'd like to borrow it for a time. So Lincoln's calling him up saying, you got to move, go back to Richmond. Finally, he takes 100,000 men down the Chesapeake Bay on ships to attack Richmond, Virginia. Has 100,000 troops versus 15,000 Confederates. That's all that was there, but still doesn't think that's enough. So he stays put down near Richmond for another month, and this allows the Confederates to get more troops into place. Gets close to Richmond, but loses a series of battles. 7 Pines, 7 days. We have the Second Battle of Bull Run. Just can't do it. Despite the fact the South suffered more casualties and Lee makes a few mistakes, the South forces the Union to retreat and go back up to the North. So the Confederates are very confident at this point. Northern morale, their self-esteem, if you will, is beginning to suffer. So Lee's going to take advantage of this, the Southern general, and he's going to attack the North for the first time following what I just read about. Why does he want to do this? Remember, the Southern strategy is just to defend. They don't have to attack to win. So he does this for a couple reasons. First of all, he wants to turn the Northern public against the war. His hope is if he goes up to the North, scores this huge victory, Northern people will be like, you know what, this war, we can't win it. Let's quit. Let's let the South do their own thing. Also, he's trying to gain support for the South in Europe. And that's really important to the South because what they're hoping for is to trade their cotton for guns and other supplies. So that leads us to Antietam. Antietam was September 1862. The where is Sharpsburg, Maryland. Remember, Maryland's a border state, but still a northern state. The background or setting, why the battle took place, Lee attacks the North for the first time, hoping to get European support for the South. So our main generals still leave for the South. Lincoln hasn't fired McClellan yet. So there's Lee. There's another photo of McClellan. Who wins? So sometimes in war, it's better to be lucky than good. 2 Union officers find a copy of Lee's battle orders wrapped around 3 cigars. McClellan learns that Lee was dividing his army of 55,000 into 2 different groups. So back then, people smoked cigars, and they had what were called rolling papers. That's what you would put the tobacco in, and then you would roll it up to smoke your cigar. Anyway, there were some battle plans that Lee had written out on these cigar papers, and somehow they got misplaced. The North finds it, takes it to McClellan. So McClellan has a plan to see what the South and Lee is going to do exactly. But McClellan had a chance to isolate the armies, split them apart, and defeat them. But McClellan being McClellan, he doesn't do anything for the next 18 hours. The North does win. Okay, so those plans did help. But many historians, even though the North wins, view McClellan as the loser because he failed over the next month to go after Lee's tired army, even though a third of McClellan's troops had never fought in the battle. They're way more rested. They have more supplies. They defeat him at Antietam. Lee's going back to the South, and McClellan just sits there. Fired. Importance. This was the deadliest single-day battle of the Civil War. More American soldiers died on just this day than in any other day in American military history. Not just the Civil War, but any war that America has participated in. Southern Army will suffer 14,000 casualties. That was a third of Lee's army was gone. Maybe even more importantly, and this is going to set up our next lesson, allows Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. So some photos. Again, we have cameras, just absolutely brutal fighting. Casualties on both sides were high. A couple of primary source accounts. Confederate soldier who fought at Antietam. The third shell struck and killed my horse, and bursting, blew him to pieces, knocked me down, of course, and tore off my right arm. A Union soldier. I wish I was home today. It seems rather hard to be a soldier, but I've got to be one after all, I think. But I can tell you one thing. If I ever live to get home, I won't be another, I can tell you. Confederate soldier. Such a storm of bullets I never conceived it possible for men to live through. Shot and shell shrieking and crashing, canister and bullets whistling and hissing most fiend-like through the air until you could almost see them. In that miles ride, I never expected to come back alive. Last one. Union soldier. The force of a minie-ball or piece of shell striking any solid portion to a person is astonishing. It comes like a blow from a sledgehammer, and the recipient finds himself sprawling on the ground before he is conscious of being hit. Then he feels about for the wound, the benumbing blow, deadening sensation for a few moments. Unless struck in the head or about the heart, men mortally wounded